listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here on another edition of LSU Daily. LSU Texas A&M, our final thoughts, our final preview, and of course, our final prediction here on the show. We have broken this game down from just about every angle possible, but there's a few more things that I do want to mention when it comes to Saturday night that we haven't dove into yet. So we'll do that today as part of our final preview and prediction. Brian Kelly met with the media on Thursday evening after practice, and the biggest news deals with Chris Hilton as he was a full participant in practice. Does that mean he's ready to go on Saturday? We'll dive into that as well and let you hear what Brian Kelly had to say with the latest update on the recovery. So plenty to do here today. Smash like, get subscribed, share as well if you have not already. All of that greatly, greatly appreciated. You can follow me on social media as well. Twitter X at Musso Matthew. You can find me on Facebook. And you can find me on Instagram at Matthew Musso1. All of that also greatly, greatly appreciated. All right, let's dive in. And we'll start with the news from Brian Kelly. When BK met with the media on Thursday evening, as previously mentioned, he spoke about Chris Hilton being a full participant in practice. He had been limited. He had been listed anywhere from probable to questionable, had gone through warm-ups against UCLA, then didn't play in the game. Kind of, they decided along with him, not the best course of action. Was in street clothes for South Alabama. Obviously didn't play against Ole Miss or Arkansas. Either of those were the games listed more as questionable. When the injury report came out on Wednesday night, Hilton again listed as questionable. That's why, a little surprising to hear Brian Kelly on Thursday evening say, yeah, he was out there in a full capacity today. So naturally, the follow-up came, and Brian Kelly had more to say about Chris Hilton's injury and recovery.
I think we had him questionable, but he's made progress. This has been a slow process for us and him. I think more than anything else, you don't bring a wide receiver back after this long out unless he's properly conditioned, because then you go pull a hamstring. Right? It's not the leg anymore. And we're not concerned, and he's not concerned about the leg. This is much more about a conditioning element relative to soft tissue more than anything else. So, we think we're in a pretty good position here. Now this is just getting him, game ready.
That's encouraging. We're not worried about the leg. He's not worried about the leg. It's conditioning. Chris Hilton's a great athlete. You want to be careful with him. Brian Kelly has mentioned that before. He's mentioned that they haven't been worried about the leg. And, can you get to a spot where you're comfortable playing through that injury and the potential for others and pain tolerance and all of that? So it just checks out. What is interesting, though, is him saying this is about getting him game ready. That's really kind of one of the newer parts of that answer. What is game ready, and is it Saturday? That's the other half of it. Is game ready a full complement of plays, a full complement of snaps? If so, then that's probably not Saturday. Chris Hilton has been down since the last week of fall camp and hasn't played at all this season. You're in the middle, really, you're at the end of October. So it's not realistic to expect him to go out there and play 30, 40, 45 snaps, 50 snaps. If that's what constitutes game ready, then no, it's not going to be Saturday. If game ready means go out there and give us something, play in the game, hey, we're going to send you deep down the field. You feel good enough to bust it loose, we'll send you deep 8, 10 snaps. Then yes, that can be Saturday. If that's what they mean by game ready, then that can be Saturday. It'll be fascinating to keep an eye on it. Y'all, I'm happy for Chris Hilton that he's back out there in a full capacity. I'm happy that he seems to be progressing to the point where they're getting him, to use BK's words again, game ready. That's awesome for a kid who's been through all the struggles that he has at LSU with the injuries. That's awesome to see. Like, throughout this, we've never lost sight of the human element with him, a guy who's worked really hard to get to this point. But until you see it, we live in a constant state of the unknown there. So we'll keep an eye on it. Maybe you'll have an answer before kickoff tomorrow. Maybe not. But definitely a step in the right direction for Chris Hilton at LSU. And look, it might be a slow build-up for him. I would imagine it would be a slow build-up for him. But eventually, hopefully, he adds the dimension to the LSU offense that has been missing all season long, and that is the consistent vertical threat down the field. Keep an eye on that. Chris Hilton, still listed as questionable, but a full participant back at practice for LSU on Thursday. All right, the game itself, final preview, final prediction time, LSU Texas A&M. As mentioned earlier, we've broken it down from a lot of different angles. There's a few that we haven't touched. I mean, we've looked at Garrett Nussmeier and Connor Wegman, right? You like the advantage LSU has in us. We've looked at the defenses and how comparable they are. LSU's passing game against A&M secondary. Can LSU run the football? All of those things we've gone through. We've talked about the spot and how it favors Texas A&M, and it does very much. In many ways, this game can be looked at as kind of the inverse of Ole Miss coming into Tiger Stadium, right down to a long losing streak on the road at that venue. There's plenty to look at. One thing I will throw out, and we talked about this pretty heavily with the line movement against Arkansas, it's worth noting here in this game. Texas A&M opened a field goal favorite. Makes sense. That's about what home field is worth in college football. That has since moved down to a pick'em, and now it's back to A&M -1. That's a lot of money towards LSU. With that type of movement, it is reasonable to believe that if this game were played on a neutral field, LSU would be the favorite. Now, what I would tell you to watch for in that regard is what ended up happening against Arkansas. LSU opened 4.5 in that game. It got all the way down to 1.5. A lot of money on Arkansas. But then by kickoff, it was back up to 3 in favor of LSU, and you saw what happened. LSU went out there and routed them. So keep in mind how that line continues to move. If it stays steady at 1, that's still a lot of sharp money, a lot of money on LSU, and that tells you, I mean, the smart guys who help set lines and move lines and all that are with the Tigers. If it fluctuates back, you're going to be more in for that tight game. But the A&M being the favorite is mainly based off of home field here. It's also important to remember that the public money doesn't move lines. That is the sharps that always move the line because they're betting just that much on it. So wanted to throw that out there as well. That should boost a little bit of confidence with that line moving more towards LSU's favor here late in the week. The other thing that we haven't really talked about that needs to be talked about is the stage, the magnitude of this football game for the Texas A&M program. I don't have to tell you listening to this. Most of you are LSU fans. You love to throw it in their face. Texas A&M's program hasn't had much success. They always have high expectations, lofty goals, a lot of hype, a lot of enthusiasm about their season, but it hasn't ever really come into fruition. It's the Texas 8-4 jokes, right? I mean, we've all heard them. They've heard them. Everyone around the country has. And it's really hard to defend those because that kind of is what you've been. But what Texas A&M is right now is 6-1 and 4-0 in the SEC. They're a good team. But even Mike Elko on Monday kind of talked about the stage and said, this is a really big chance for Texas A&M to prove it.
It's going to be a huge challenge. It's going to be a great environment. It's going to be an opportunity for us to go out there and show we belong on this stage. And I've taken this program where we all thought we wanted it to go. It's a great opportunity. It's a great venue. They're a great team. We're a talented team. It's going to be a lot of fun.
It's a chance to show we belong. They're well aware. Now, how do they respond? And history would show you not well. This is not a place that program is used to being. And a lot of A&M people aren't going to agree with that or aren't going to like hearing that. But the head coach just said, this is a chance to show we belong on this stage. That's the head coach of the program, saying that. A lot's always made about Ole Miss in this spot, and it was earlier this year. Not necessarily against LSU. I'm talking about the Kentucky game, where they blew through the non-conference easy, right? Played nobody. They faced adversity for the first time, and they folded. There's a lot of transfers on there, maybe not a cohesive unit of a team. All those things, the stage, the program's just not used to being on there. You don't know how to handle success. All of those things, and I think a lot of those parallels can be drawn to Texas A&M. How they handle it will be huge. And it's not just them, it's Mike Elko as well. This is easily the biggest game for Mike Elko in his head coaching career. He's never coached a game like this on this stage. He just hasn't. Look, what's the biggest game he's coached in to this point? Is it as the head coach? Is it the Notre Dame game at Duke last year? That comes to mind. He had Duke in a really good spot. You got a top ranked I think it was a top 10 Notre Dame team rolling into Durham last year. And it was a great game. Notre Dame ended up taking it, winning and covering, but it was a highly competitive, tough game. LSU visiting Kyle Field in a top 15 matchup with both teams undefeated is so far ahead of that. Like, Notre Dame at Duke doesn't even friggin' touch the stage that is Saturday night. And we've already seen A&M on a big stage this year. Coincidentally against Notre Dame. And it didn't go well. It was a tightly contested game, but your quarterback, Connor Wegman, was awful that day. Objectively, he was bad. 12 of 30 for 100 yards and 2 interceptions. Le'Veon Moss was shut down for 70 yards. And a late score helped Notre Dame pull away and win it by 10 when, again, it was a close game up until that point in the fourth quarter. But you weren't able to make the plays to win that game. This is their second chance. How do they respond? That's a huge storyline in this game because LSU, there's players on this team that know what it's like to, play in a big-time atmosphere at home against Alabama and win. Like your two starting tackles, for instance, Greg Penn, Sage Ryan, Major Burns, Kyron Lacey, on and on and on down the list. Those guys have been through this. Parashant, those guys have been through this. Brian Kelly has coached games in the playoff. Brian Kelly has coached in a national championship game. LSU's program is used to this stage. We'll see how big of an impact that has in this game. It's at home for A&M, and that should be a big advantage. But also sometimes that could swallow you up. They're out to prove they belong. Can they? Well, that's where we can get back into some of our talking points from earlier in the week. LSU has such an advantage at quarterback. I love that. And they're going to score. Texas A&M's defense is very, very good. We have talked about it a lot. They potentially have 2 first-rounders on the defensive line. Nick Scorton, everybody expects to be there in April. Shamar Stewart also could be there as well as a first-round pick. And then you have Shamar Turner as a early day 2 guy. That defensive line is fierce. The linebacking core has been good. Will Lee has been awesome at cornerback. LSU is going to score points in this game. They just are. Everyone is focused so much on the good-on-good matchup. LSU's offensive front, A&M's defensive front, and their pass rush. The fact of the matter is LSU's offensive line has given up 2 sacks all year, and both of them came against South Carolina. And they have faced really good fronts. And they've won. And they've won. And they've won. And that is a really hard thing to do because you are out on an island and have to react in that position. And Campbell and Jones have done great at that. While A&M's interior guys, like we talked about, the Shamars are very good. Pass rush isn't a huge part of their game, but them in stopping the run could be massive. LSU is going to have to be able to run the football at some point in this game. I'm not telling you LSU needs to go out there and run for 200 yards. I don't think they're going to do that anyway. But this is going to be the type game where you have to be able to have it, and you can get it. And that's been a problem at points for LSU this year, but more recently, they've been very good at that. So I'm confident that when LSU has to have the rushing yards, that they can get it. That you can have the cohesiveness that Brian Kelly talked about in the running game when you absolutely have to, and you can pick it up. And that's what you need. What you can't have is you can't run for 80 yards like you did against Ole Miss. You can't. I don't want to see LSU have a 51, attempt passing day. Because I do think A&M will play more coverage because of their confidence in being able to stop the run. And you saw Nuss get off to a slower start. If they give you the look, lighter box, take it and try to establish that running game. I would look for similar touches for Caden Durham. He had 22 touches last week against Arkansas. I would look for similar touches there in this game, both in the running game and in the passing game. And you complement him with Williams and Jackson. Jackson had a few nice runs against Arkansas. That just adds another dimension to this LSU running game. It's something you're starting to feel better about. So, yes, I think LSU will be able to run the ball enough in this game. Now we flip to the conversation on the other side for LSU, and that's stopping the A&M run. Because I don't think Connor Wegman can beat you with his arm. If he does, hat tip to him. Good on him. But that would be an outlier. I don't think he can beat you with his arm. You have to stop the run and make them a one-dimensional team. And we have talked about this all week. LSU's defense is closer to Texas A&M's than a lot of people think. We went through the stop rate. We went through, the rushing defense. We went through the passing. We went through all of it. Scored it. They are closer than a lot of people think. And that ultimately is what gives me the confidence in LSU in this football game. LSU just stopped an Arkansas rushing attack that was averaging a tick under 200 yards per game and just lambasted them for 60 minutes. They had success stuffing a South Alabama rushing attack that is very good. That is very good. The big plays, the busted plays, the missed run fits hurt LSU early. They have been in the right spot more often than not the last few weeks. You didn't have a big run against South Alabama. You didn't have a big run against Arkansas. You had one big run against Ole Miss, and that's it. And Le'Veon Moss is awesome. Baton Rouge kid. He's a second in the SEC in rushing. He's awesome, and he's going to get yards. I don't think you're going to go out there and hold him to 25 yards. He might even get 100. But if you hold him to 100 yards, it's going to be hard for A&M to beat you. This needs to be a huge day, I think, for Le'Veon Moss because I just have that little faith in Texas A&M's passing game. And again, maybe they'll prove me wrong on that. You saw Connor Wegman go out and play great against Missouri. I would tell you LSU is better than Missouri. And the stage is way bigger. We'll see how he handles that, as we talked about earlier. 4 weeks ago, if we would have looked at this game, the narrative would have been LSU's offense versus A&M's defense. And it still is, in a sense. And I like LSU's chances in that matchup. As we've said plenty, LSU is going to score. The thing that has flipped this game on its head is LSU's defense and the improvement that they have made in the last 4 weeks and how they've pulled themselves closer to the level of a Texas A&M. And I think that's actually the difference in the ballgame, is LSU's defense. Can they go stop what is a one-dimensional A&M offense? And here's the other thing I will throw out right at the very end. I would not be surprised if A&M played 2 quarterbacks. Marcel Reed was really good for them, was really, really good for them in his 3 starts when Wegman was out. And that adds another rushing element to the offense. It would not shock me at all if Marcel Reed has some type of package in this game, because the rushing attack is going to be so key for A&M. But I think LSU's defense and the improvement that they have made are the difference in the football game. I think they can stop A&M enough to where they can't score with LSU. It'll be a low-scoring game, but the improvements that LSU's defense have made, not just overall, but in the running game, where A&M's their strength, that can make that offense one-dimensional. I think LSU has a really good shot to do it, and I think LSU does it, and I think LSU wins the game, which is not something I would have told you 4 weeks ago. But give me the Tigers, 27-23 in this matchup over Texas A&M to stay perfect in the SEC, to move to 7-1 and set up a giant matchup with Alabama after the second bye week. You know, I have a full recap for you on Monday. It's LSU Daily. Like, share, subscribe. Follow me on social media. Thank you for being here, and be here next time for more on LSU Daily.